Well, attractive, most organisations have values written down in some way or another these days. So the difficulty, obviously, is translation from something written down to something which is living.
Yes, and in fact, it's the behaviours that support the values that are more important than the values almost. And they sort of shape the personality of an organisation. It's why one bank is different from another bank. The set of behaviours that they're using to support their stated values often give them a competitive advantage, because it provides this consensus around why the organisation exists, how it succeeds, and how people should be managed.
Well, give us an example of how a value becomes a behaviour. What's the difference?
Well, if, for example, you've got respect as a value, in your internal community, it would mean that you show respect to your colleagues, and you might have a behaviour that says, well, before I make a decision that impacts upon you, I'll consult you. Again, if you have a value of respect towards your external communities, it might mean that you're consultative in the way that you deliver your service to them, so that they can co-design the service with you. And that ultimately, I suppose, is what a learning organisation is. It's one that reflects upon what it's doing to stop its people being the best that they can. And if the appropriate behaviour isn't being modelled from the top, then somehow that message has got to be put on the table so that the system learns and people can step up to that accountability of leadership. And that's leadership at all levels, that they role model the behaviour that's consistent with the stated value.
There's always a risk that implementing values is a new way of preaching from the top, which, and particularly preaching about motherhood things. Aren't values common sense after all? How do you overcome that problem?
I think values are what makes each of us unique individuals. So we start off with a problem. If you've got an organisation with 22,000 employees like the tax office, you've got potentially 22,000 different ways of responding to one situation if people operate out of their personal values. So organisations really have to develop a set of collective values that everyone can buy into and that guide behaviour when you're making decisions on behalf of the organisation. So the first challenge for organisations is to draw that boundary. You have your personal values and then you have the organisational values. And when you make decisions that impact on the organisation, the only way we can get consensus amongst 22,000 people is if we each use the organisation's values. And it might be extended to, do they have the resources necessary to do the task? Do they have the skills? Have they been trained? So it's saying that, it's checking out that it's a fair context, that the person that you're asking to do the task is actually skilled to do the task, has the resources to do the task, and knows what's expected of them. So it's quite complex. I think that whole discussion that Simon's just talked us through shows the importance of building shared meaning, that we don't all see the world the same way. So we have to have these discussions, which is why it's so great to have this dialogue. So instead of saying, I'm going to tell you what the values are, it's having a conversation. Organisational life is characterised by conversations around budgets and outcomes and all those other hard things. We very rarely have these conversations around what does it mean to be a values-driven organisation? What's the benefits of a values-driven organisation? What's the core purpose of the organisation? We have to have those conversations as well, and I think that's what the values platform gives you. It gives you that platform where you can start to talk about what's the purpose of the organisation, how will it impact on society, what do people look for when they join an organisation. The interesting research today shows that the public sector is now an employer of choice. People graduating from universities are choosing the public sector after the top 3 accountancy firms, which seems quite strange because the pay differentials are quite huge. And when they drill down to see why are you making the ATO or the public sector an employer of choice, for many people it was a sense of purpose. They wanted to feel that they were contributing to society, that they were building social capital. So we have a new generation that have ethical ambition. It's not enough just to have a pay packet. They want to have a job that's worthwhile, and they want to feel like they're actually making a contribution to a better society.